The chandeliers sparkled like they were competing for attention. Cameras flashed in synchronized chaos. Laughter rose in elegant bursts, carried by champagne bubbles and the hum of Los Angeles's most powerful voices. It was Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party, a night that wasn't just a celebration but a declaration of Hollywood power. Every name that mattered was there. Every eye that mattered was watching. And then, Meghan Markle walked in. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. She wasn't on the official guest list. At least, not until a mysterious last-minute adjustment came through Kris's assistant. Her arrival wasn't grand. It was seismic. The chatter slowed. The laughter dulled. The music, some say, stopped for half a beat. It was as if Hollywood itself took a deep breath, unsure what to do with her. Because in a world built on reputation, Meghan Markle had become a symbol of both fascination and fatigue. But here she was again, in a shimmering silver gown that caught every light in the room, clutching Prince Harry's hand like it was the only anchor she had left. And across the table, with a glass of Dom Perignon in one hand and that famously sharp smile on her face, sat Kris Jenner, the matriarch of America's most powerful family. Two worlds collided in that ballroom. The self-made queen of reality television and the self-proclaimed duchess who walked away from royalty. It didn't take long before everyone in the room realized this was going to be a show. What happens when two women known for control, image, and influence find themselves at the same table? The answer came in 6 cutting words that would echo far beyond that marble floor. You can't sit with us. But before that line shattered the room's atmosphere, the tension had been building all night. Let's rewind a few hours. Kris Jenner had planned her 70th birthday like she planned her empire, with precision, extravagance, and perfect optics. Every flower was imported, every crystal centerpiece handpicked. The Kardashian-Jenner sisters had rehearsed their speeches. The media outlets were carefully selected. Even the lighting was tuned to make her look 20 years younger. This wasn't a party. It was a statement. A reminder that in Hollywood, no one reigns forever, but Kris had managed to hold her throne longer than most kingdoms. And that's exactly why Meghan Markle wanted to be there. Her own empire, built on interviews, Netflix deals, and half-hearted activism, was starting to crumble. Brands had gone quiet. Public sympathy had cooled. Even the tabloids that once glorified her drama were beginning to move on. She needed visibility. She needed power proximity. And there was no better place to reclaim it than under Kris Jenner's spotlight. But there was one problem. Kris didn't see Meghan as an equal. In fact, according to whispers among guests, Kris had joked days before the event, if Meghan shows up, make sure the cameras get her from the side. That's her good angle. It was the kind of backhanded Hollywood humor that traveled fast. By the time Meghan arrived, half the room already knew there was tension. Imagine walking into a room full of people who have been talking about you, who have dissected your choices, your marriage, your failures. Meghan knew that feeling. She'd lived it in the royal palace. But tonight, it wasn't the British press watching, it was Hollywood royalty. As she entered, cameras turned. Heads tilted. Some smiled politely. Others exchanged glances. Kim Kardashian's expression? Frozen amusement. Khloe's? Amused disbelief. Kourtney whispered something to Travis Barker and smirked. Even Oprah, ever the peacemaker, tightened her lips and looked down at her drink. And at the center of it all, Kris sat poised like a queen watching a rival enter her court. Look who finally made it, Kris said, her voice smooth but her eyes unflinching. Meghan smiled, the kind of rehearsed smile she used in interviews. Wouldn't miss it for the world. But beneath that polished surface, the tension was electric. Harry, ever the supportive husband, placed a hand on her back. Maybe we should just say hi and go, he whispered. Not tonight, Meghan replied softly. Not when they're all watching. And she was right. They were watching. Because in Hollywood, every glance is a headline waiting to happen. For the first half hour, things remained civil. Meghan mingled cautiously. Harry lingered near the bar, chatting briefly with Orlando Bloom. Meghan tried small talk with Kim, who smiled politely but quickly excused herself to greet Jennifer Lopez. Kylie scrolled through her phone, pretending not to notice. It was the unspoken rejection that hurt the most. The irony? Meghan had once mocked the Kardashians in old interviews, dismissing their fame as manufactured. Now, years later, she stood in their world, trying to belong. Why does this story matter? Because it's not just about a birthday party. It's about two empires colliding, one built on family, the other built on self-image. Kris Jenner built power by keeping her circle tight. Meghan Markle built hers by breaking free. Both were master storytellers. But only one could control the narrative that night. And for Meghan, control was slipping fast. As the dinner began, Kris took her seat at the main table, a spot reserved for the elite of the elite. The seats around her were filled with A-list icons. Oprah on one side, Kim on the other, a cluster of Hollywood moguls and global influencers nearby. Meghan assumed she and Harry would be among them. After all, they were royals, or at least they used to be. But when Meghan approached the table, Kris turned to her with that perfectly sculpted smile. "Oh, sweetheart," Kris said lightly, her voice dripping in charm. "This table's full. Maybe try the next one." It was the tone that did it. Sweet on the surface, venom beneath. Meghan hesitated. "Oh, I was told we'd be seated here." Kris tilted her head. "Really? Who told you that?" A pause. The air thickened. People nearby stopped talking. Then, with the same calmness that built her billion-dollar empire, Kris delivered the words that would be replayed, whispered, and tweeted for weeks. "You can't sit with us." The line hung in the air like a slap. A Hollywood mean girl moment decades in the making. Meghan froze. Harry blinked, unsure whether to laugh or walk out. A few nervous giggles scattered across the table. Kim sipped her wine. Oprah raised her brows, as if to say, "Not now." But Kris didn't flinch. She turned back to her plate, signaling the conversation was over. And just like that, Meghan was publicly dismissed. Now here's the question everyone asked afterward. Was Kris joking, or was it calculated? Because Kris Jenner doesn't say things by accident. Every public moment she creates is a piece of strategy. Some insiders claimed it was personal, that Kris saw Meghan as someone trying to climb into her inner circle without earning her place. Others said it was business, that Meghan had been pitching a joint project involving her and Kim, and Kris had quietly rejected it. Whatever the reason, Meghan's humiliation was complete. She smiled, forced, brittle, and said, "Of course, no problem." But her voice wavered. Harry stepped forward, muttering something under his breath. But Meghan tugged his arm. "It's fine," she whispered. "Just find us another seat." Fine. That's the word people use right before they break. As they walked toward another table, whispers followed them like a shadow. Guests exchanged looks, half pity, half gossip. A few phones recorded discreetly. One video, reportedly filmed by a stylist at the next table, would later leak online, showing Meghan's tight smile and Kris's smirk in slow motion. That 12-second clip would hit the internet before the night was over. But at that moment, Meghan didn't know it yet. She sat down, back straight, smile fixed, pretending not to care. Inside, though, the fury was building. Harry leaned in, whispering, "We should go." Meghan shook her head. Leaving would make it worse. She picked up her champagne glass and smiled for the cameras. Across the room, Kris Jenner laughed at something Kim said, glancing Meghan's way with the satisfaction of someone who knew she had won the moment. The rest of the night unfolded like slow-motion warfare. Meghan tried to engage in conversation, but few responded. When she approached the dessert table, a group of influencers fell silent. When she complimented Kylie's outfit, Kylie just said, "Thanks," and turned back to her phone. Every moment reinforced the same message: you don't belong here. And that's when the realization began to sink in. Meghan wasn't just being mocked. She was being exiled from Hollywood's most powerful circle. To some, it might have looked like a petty moment at a party. But in Hollywood, reputation is currency. And Kris Jenner had just devalued Meghan's stock in front of everyone who mattered. Still, Meghan refused to give Kris the satisfaction of seeing her break. She posed for photos, smiled for photographers, and danced for a few minutes, just enough to convince onlookers she was unbothered. But those who watched closely saw the truth. The stiff jaw, the clenched fingers, the eyes that kept darting toward Kris, who was basking in laughter, surrounded by her daughters and celebrity friends. And when the night ended, Meghan was among the first to leave. Witnesses later said she left abruptly, barely saying goodbye, her expression tight and unreadable. Harry followed silently, face pale, his hand on her back as they exited through the side door. Outside, the flash of paparazzi cameras caught the exact moment Meghan turned away, shielding her face. Inside, Kris raised a glass and said, "To good company." The crowd laughed. And somewhere between the laughter and the flashing lights, Meghan realized something she'd tried to ignore for years. Hollywood wasn't her kingdom. Not anymore. But what happened after she left would make everything worse, because the real drama didn't end that night. It was only beginning. Because by morning, the internet would explode. And Meghan Markle's name would be at the center of a viral storm no one saw coming. And Kris Jenner? She knew exactly what she'd done. It began with an envelope, sleek, black, embossed with gold foil that shimmered in the light. The kind of invitation you didn't just receive, you earned it. Kris Jenner's 70th birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was the Hollywood event of the year. Rumor had it that even A-listers had to compete for a spot. Some were begging publicists, others trading favors just to be on the list. The words "by invitation only" weren't just for decoration. They were law. The guest list was guarded like nuclear codes. But someone had slipped through the cracks. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The envelope never reached Meghan Markle officially. And yet, she arrived. The guest list, when it leaked days later, read like a social resume of power. Oprah Winfrey, Jennifer Lopez, Ellen DeGeneres, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kim Kardashian, and even Jeff Bezos. Each name carefully chosen for status, influence, or story value. But Meghan Markle's name? Nowhere in sight. And that's where it started. The whisper, the curiosity, the slow-building sense that the night was going to turn explosive. Why would Meghan come to a party where she wasn't expected? Simple. In Hollywood, absence means irrelevance. And for Meghan Markle, irrelevance was more terrifying than rejection. At first, Kris Jenner's team thought it was a rumor. When the valet announced, "The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have arrived," the assistant froze. "They're not on the list," she whispered, eyes wide. Kris, already in full hostess mode, turned, perfectly composed. "Oh, really?" she said, her tone deceptively calm. "Let them in. It'll be fun." That was classic Kris. Control the chaos by turning it into content. From the moment Meghan stepped onto the red carpet, she made sure every camera was ready. Her entrance was deliberate, slow, confident, eyes scanning the crowd. The silver gown she wore shimmered under the flashes, a statement that screamed, "I belong here." Harry followed close behind, his expression unreadable, as if he already sensed what was coming. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some clapped politely, others exchanged glances. But what everyone was really thinking was the same. Did Kris actually invite her? Hollywood is built on invisible hierarchies. You can't just walk into someone else's empire and expect to be treated as royalty, especially when your own crown is tarnished. For Kris Jenner, her birthday wasn't just a milestone. It was a power audit, a public reaffirmation that she was still the queen of American fame. The woman who had turned her family into a billion-dollar dynasty. The woman who made reality television look like an empire and scandal look like marketing. To have Meghan Markle appear uninvited at that moment wasn't just inconvenient. It was provocative. It was like showing up at a royal coronation unannounced, wearing a tiara bigger than the queen's. And Kris knew exactly how to respond, with grace, charm, and just enough sting to remind everyone who ran the room. But here's the twist. Meghan wasn't the only controversial arrival that night. Across the guest list were names Kris had strategically placed near certain people to stir conversation, ignite gossip, and ensure headlines. She called it her alchemy seating plan. Oprah near Kim for a photo op, Jennifer Lopez near Kris's new business partner. And, ironically, one empty seat right beside Kris's table, reserved for a surprise guest. The irony? Meghan assumed that surprise guest was her. But Kris had someone else in mind. That person never showed. So when Meghan appeared, Kris took it as a challenge. The battle lines were invisible but undeniable. Every smile was a weapon. Every conversation a test of social endurance. Hollywood's elite know the rules. If you're not invited, you don't come. And if you do come, you better bring something worth the trouble: buzz, money, or scandal. Meghan brought all three. Some attendees, like Oprah and Ellen, looked uncomfortable, aware that cameras were already focusing on Meghan. Others, like Kim and Khloe, exchanged subtle smirks. This was reality TV gold, and they knew it. But for Meghan, it wasn't about attention. It was about redemption. She believed this night could reposition her. That walking into Kris Jenner's world would prove she still mattered. that she could stand shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's elite and reclaim her narrative after years of criticism, failed projects, and PR disasters. She wasn't just attending a party, she was staging a comeback. Harry, however, wasn't so sure. He'd been through this before. The looks, the whispers, the sense that every room they entered was already against them. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" he had asked earlier that evening. Meghan had smiled tightly. "It's not a good idea. It's a necessary one." Inside the ballroom, Kris was in her element. Cameras from her upcoming documentary were rolling discreetly. She knew this night would feed future storylines, maybe even become a defining moment for the Kardashian brand. When she heard the murmurs, "Meghan's here," she didn't panic. She adjusted her necklace, took a sip of champagne, and whispered to Kim, "Let's make this fun." For Kris, power wasn't about confrontation, it was about narrative control. And in that instant, she decided she would own the story, even if it meant humiliating someone to do it. As the evening unfolded, Meghan tried to blend in, but her presence was magnetic in all the wrong ways. Conversations paused when she passed. Photographers adjusted their angles. And the more she smiled, the colder the room seemed to grow. What she didn't know was that half the people there had received an unspoken memo. Keep it cordial, keep it brief. No alliances. Meghan had once been the story. Tonight, she was the distraction. Still, she tried. She approached Kim with open arms. Kim hugged her back stiffly, eyes darting toward Kris as if asking, "Do I have to?" She chatted with Oprah for a few minutes, trying to recapture that old warmth from their explosive interview. But Oprah's tone was distant, polite, professional, detached. Meghan could feel it, the invisible wall closing around her. Meanwhile, Kris glided through the crowd, every step measured, every word calculated. When she finally made her way toward Meghan, the atmosphere shifted. People subtly cleared space, sensing what was about to unfold. "Meghan," Kris said, her smile dazzling under the lights. "So wonderful to see you here." Meghan smiled back, matching the energy. "Happy birthday, Kris. You look incredible." "Don't I?" Kris replied with a chuckle. 70s, the new 40. Laughter rippled around them, but the undertone was sharp. Kris thrived on that energy, the tension, the curiosity. She knew everyone was watching, and she loved it. "So," Kris said, taking a delicate sip of her drink, "did you come with someone, or did you just happen to wander in?" It was a joke on the surface, but everyone felt the jab beneath it. Harry stepped in, his voice firm but calm. "We were invited." Kris smiled sweetly. "Of course you were, darling. Everyone's invited in spirit." The words hung like perfume, sweet but suffocating. That moment would later be replayed in countless retellings by insiders and gossip sites. Some swore Kris winked afterward. Others said Meghan laughed it off. But those close enough to see her eyes claimed she was holding back tears. Still, Meghan held her ground. "We're happy to celebrate with you," she said. "It's a big night." Kris nodded. "Oh, it is. 70 years of surviving Hollywood. That's no small thing. You'll find that out soon enough." The tone, once again, walked the line between charm and insult. Kris was reminding her that Hollywood doesn't welcome outsiders, it devours them. By the end of the cocktail hour, Meghan realized something devastating. She wasn't at Kris Jenner's birthday to celebrate her. She was there as entertainment, for others to watch, judge, and whisper about. The guest list wasn't just about who was included. It was about who didn't belong. And Meghan, despite her title, her fame, and her carefully constructed image, had just been shown she was still an outsider. She excused herself to the restroom, clutching her clutch tighter than ever. In the mirror, she forced a smile, practicing composure. "You're fine," she whispered to her reflection. "You've faced worse." But even she knew that wasn't true, because this wasn't the British palace. This was Hollywood, a battlefield without crowns, but with sharper knives. And somewhere in that ballroom, Kris Jenner was already planning her next move. Because for Kris, every moment of tension was a potential headline. Every awkward silence was a story waiting to go viral. She looked across the room at Meghan and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that meant something was about to happen. And Meghan? She still believed she could win the room. But what she didn't know was that Kris had already set the stage for her downfall. The birthday toasts hadn't even begun yet, but the social execution was well underway. And when the dinner bell rang, Kris Jenner would deliver her first blow. Because the real battle wasn't on the guest list, it was at the table. And Kris had just made sure Meghan wouldn't have a seat there. What happened next would silence the room and ignite Hollywood's most viral feud of the year. But before that moment came, one final whisper from a nearby guest sealed Meghan's fate. She really thought she could just show up? And that whisper traveled faster than any camera flash. By the time Meghan sat down, her humiliation had already begun. And Kris Jenner hadn't even started speaking yet. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was supposed to be her moment. The one where Meghan Markle could walk back into the spotlight and reclaim the narrative. A grand entrance, a soft smile, a flash of confidence. She knew the cameras were waiting. She knew Hollywood still wanted to see her, even if it was just to judge. But what she didn't know was that timing, in Hollywood, is everything. And that night, her timing couldn't have been worse. The ballroom doors at the Beverly Hills Hotel opened with a sweep of velvet and light. For a second, the room fell quiet, a rare thing in a space packed with egos and entourages. Then came the whispers. Is that? No way, she really came. All eyes turned. There she was, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who had walked away from Buckingham Palace only to try and build one of her own in Los Angeles. The cameras flickered to life instinctively. Phones lifted. Heads turned. The lighting from the chandeliers caught the shimmer of her silver gown, and for a fleeting second, she looked radiant, untouchable, almost royal again. Harry stood beside her in a black tuxedo, expression fixed somewhere between loyalty and discomfort. If you'd paused the moment right there, it might have looked triumphant. But then, reality kicked in. This wasn't a royal gala. This was Kris Jenner's house. Her rules, her hierarchy, her people. And no one, not even a duchess, upstaged Kris Jenner on her own birthday. The Kardashian cameras didn't zoom in. The A-listers didn't stand to greet her. Instead, the energy in the room shifted, not toward applause, but toward curiosity. The kind of curiosity that felt like judgment. A few guests exchanged amused glances. Kim, sitting at the main table near Kris, leaned in and whispered something to Khloe. They both smiled, not warmly. Kylie looked up from her phone for half a second, tilted her head, and then looked back down. Even Oprah, sitting beside Kris, offered Meghan a small smile that said, "You're brave for showing up, but you're not staying long." And that was the problem. Meghan thought she was entering a room of peers. But to everyone else, she had just entered a lion's den. "Smile?" she whispered to Harry, adjusting his tie as the flashes continued. "We're fine." Harry nodded, but his jaw was tight. He'd seen this look before, the one people gave when they were sizing them up, not welcoming them. Meghan didn't notice. She had trained herself to ignore the whispers, to let the noise fuel her presence. She waved gently, flashed that practiced, camera-perfect grin, and strode forward as if she owned the moment. But Kris Jenner was watching. And Kris Jenner didn't like surprises. From her seat, Kris raised her glass slightly, her lips curving into a faint smirk. To her, this wasn't an interruption, it was an opportunity. Her guests leaned closer. The matriarch's expression meant something was about to happen. Meghan and Harry made their way toward the central table, the one Kris had reserved for her inner circle. The birthday cake gleamed in the center, surrounded by towering crystal arrangements and diamond-studded name cards. Meghan slowed when she saw the nameplates. Oprah, Kim, Jennifer Lopez, Ellen, Khloe, Kris herself. But none for her. Still, she smiled. "Maybe they forgot," she whispered. Harry's voice was low. "Meg, maybe we should sit somewhere else." She shook her head. "No, we're supposed to be here." They approached. Meghan placed her clutch delicately on the table's edge. Kris looked up, perfectly poised. "Well, if it isn't the Duchess herself," Kris said, voice dripping in politeness that cut like a blade. "Kris," Meghan said, her smile unwavering. "Happy birthday. You look amazing." Kris chuckled softly. "Always do, darling." 70 never looked this good. The laughter from nearby guests was immediate. Not mean, but layered. That kind of Hollywood laughter that said, "We're in on the joke." "You're not." Meghan tilted her head. "You really outdid yourself tonight. It's beautiful." "Oh, thank you," Kris replied, placing her drink down. "You know me. Everything's about the details. Invitations, seating, lighting, it's all part of the magic." She emphasized the word invitations. Meghan's smile flickered for just a second. Yes, it's quite exclusive. It is, Kris said, her eyes locking with Meghan's. Though sometimes people just show up. Which is fine, of course. A pause. Just long enough for everyone nearby to hear. Harry shifted, uncomfortable. Meghan let out a small laugh, pretending it was nothing. Oh, well, we didn't want to miss such a big night. Kris nodded, still smiling. And yet here you are. If there was one thing Kris Jenner knew how to do, it was deliver humiliation wrapped in charm. For a moment, the air between them felt electric. Meghan knew she had to pivot fast. She gestured to Oprah. You look wonderful, Oprah. It's so good to see you. Oprah smiled kindly. You too, Meghan. Then, a pause. It's been a while. That pause said everything. Oprah's distance meant Meghan's media ally wasn't about to save her this time. Meghan looked around, hoping to spot another friendly face. Jennifer Lopez avoided eye contact. Chloe pretended to check her nails. Even the servers seemed hesitant to linger near her. Then came the cruelest irony. The music swelled, and the host's announcer took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to the woman who built an empire, Kris Jenner. The room erupted in applause. Everyone raised their glasses. Meghan and Harry joined in, though their smiles were tight, forced. Kris stood, accepting the moment like a queen acknowledging her subjects. Thank you all for being here tonight. I've had a wild 70 years, and I couldn't imagine celebrating it with anyone else. She paused, scanning the crowd deliberately. Her gaze passed over Meghan, then continued. Anyone else? The emphasis wasn't lost on anyone. Meghan's chest tightened. The air around her seemed heavier. Harry leaned in. Maybe we should leave now before it gets worse. Not yet, she whispered. We can't give them that satisfaction. But in trying to save face, she only prolonged the agony. For the next 30 minutes, she played her part. She smiled for cameras, made small talk with anyone willing to engage, and laughed at jokes she didn't understand. But under the polished surface, her pride was cracking. People weren't treating her as an equal. They were observing her like a fallen star trying to glow again. At one point, Kim approached her for a brief, tight exchange. You look great, Meghan. Thank you, Meghan replied warmly. Kim smiled thinly. Silver, huh? Brave choice. Mom hates when anyone else wears sparkle. A joke, maybe. But in that room, everything was coded. When Kim walked away, Meghan exhaled, the smile gone. Why does everything feel like a test? She whispered to Harry. Because it is, he murmured back. Then it happened. The moment Meghan's PR team would later call an unfortunate misunderstanding. As the dinner began, Meghan and Harry made their way toward the main table. A waiter pulled out a chair for Meghan beside Oprah, assuming she belonged there. But Kris stopped mid-sentence, looked up, and said gently, Oh, sweetheart, I think there's been a mix-up. Meghan froze. Oh, Kris's smile didn't waver. This table's full. Try the next one, maybe. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Light, polite, deadly. Meghan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Harry's hand found hers under the table. It's fine, she said softly. Of course. Kris turned back to her conversation, as if nothing had happened. The music continued. The laughter resumed. But for Meghan, everything had gone still. They moved to a smaller table toward the edge of the room, near influencers, managers, and socialites, far from the power core. It was like watching royalty being demoted to the crowd. And yet, Meghan kept smiling. She adjusted her gown, lifted her chin, and tried to appear unaffected. But every time someone looked her way, she felt the pity, the amusement, the silent judgment. Harry squeezed her hand. Meg, let's go. She shook her head. Leaving means they win. He sighed, looking around the room. They already have. It was then that Kris, catching Meghan's gaze from across the floor, leaned toward Kim and whispered something. Kim laughed, too loudly. And that laugh carried across the room like a signal. The Queen had spoken. In that instant, Meghan realized this wasn't a party anymore. It was a performance. And she was the punchline. The photographers caught it too, the moment where her smile faltered, just barely, before she masked it again. By morning, that photo would be everywhere. The Duchess looking beautiful, yes, but uncomfortable. Out of place. Alone in a sea of glittering acceptance she couldn't touch. She thought her entrance had been her comeback. But it had only marked the beginning of her downfall. Because while she was trying to hold on to dignity, Kris Jenner was writing the script. And the next line of that script was about to become iconic. A single phrase that would burn into pop culture memory. And it would come straight from Kris Jenner's lips. 6 words that would turn the party into a battlefield. Because as Meghan reached for her champagne glass, Kris leaned in, smiled sweetly, and prepared to drop the line that would humiliate a duchess in front of Hollywood's elite. What she said next would end Meghan's night and start a feud the world couldn't stop talking about. There's a certain kind of silence that fills a room right before chaos breaks loose. The kind where every sound seems too loud. The clink of a glass, the rustle of a napkin, the murmur of people pretending not to watch. That was the silence that swallowed Kris Jenner's ballroom just before she said it. Meghan Markle sat with her back straight, chin high, and a practiced smile that had been through years of press briefings and palace appearances. She was used to uncomfortable rooms. She'd survived the royal family. She'd survived British tabloids. But this was different. Because in this room, no one had to pretend they respected her. From across the table, Kris Jenner looked poised, elegant, in full command. She didn't just host a party. She curated an experience, each guest a prop in the theater of her power. Her diamond necklace glittered with every small movement, catching the light like a crown. And then there was Meghan, former duchess, now standing in the shadow of a woman who had turned her own name into an empire. For 20 minutes, they'd managed to coexist. Kris talked animatedly to Oprah. Kim whispered jokes to Jennifer Lopez. Harry sat quietly, his hand on Meghan's knee, a silent signal that said, "Just breathe, don't let them win." Then came the turning point. A server approached, pouring champagne into fluted glasses. Kris raised hers high. "To longevity," she said. "To 70 years of doing it my way, and still looking fabulous doing it." Laughter erupted. Glasses clinked. Meghan joined in politely. "You certainly have built something incredible, Kris," she said, her voice smooth, calm. Kris smiled. "I try. But it's more than that," Meghan continued, maybe trying too hard. "You've created a dynasty. It's not easy to do that, especially in the spotlight." "Tell me about it," Kris said, her voice sharp with amusement. "You'd know all about that, wouldn't you?" The table went still again. It wasn't what Kris said, it was how she said it. Sweet tone, steady gaze, knife under the sugar. Meghan chuckled awkwardly, searching for footing. "Well, I suppose every family has their challenges." Kris leaned back in her chair, her red manicured nails drumming against the stem of her glass. "Oh, darling, challenges are what make good television. You just have to know how to spin them." Kim's smirk was instantaneous. Oprah looked away. Harry's grip tightened. Meghan's smile stiffened. "I guess we both know something about public perception." Kris tilted her head, all feigned innocence. "Oh, I don't think it's quite the same, dear. I mean, I built mine." A ripple of muffled laughter. That was it. The moment the atmosphere shifted from tension to spectacle. Guests began subtly leaning closer, pretending to check their phones, but recording snippets. Kris noticed and didn't stop them. For a woman who'd made a career out of controlling the narrative, she knew exactly what this would look like online. A composed, elegant business icon putting a troublesome duchess in her place. Meghan tried to defuse it. "Well, every empire starts somewhere." Kris smiled wider. "True. But not every empire stays standing." That did it. The smile on Meghan's face faltered for the first time. Harry spoke softly, almost under his breath. "Let's just go." Meghan shook her head, still trying to maintain the illusion of control. "It's fine," she whispered. "I can handle her." Kris caught that. She leaned in slightly, resting her elbows on the table. "Oh, don't leave yet, honey. The night's still young. Besides, we were just getting to the good part." And then, like it had been rehearsed, like the universe itself had scripted it, Kris reached for her glass again, looked directly at Meghan, and said it. "You can't sit with us." 6 words. The air was gone. It was quiet enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning, the shuffle of a waiter backing away. Every conversation in the room died mid-sentence. For a second, Meghan thought she'd misheard. Her expression froze, eyes darting toward Harry. He blinked, confused, then angry. Kris didn't look away. Her face was calm, smiling, the way a CEO smiles when she knows she's already won. "Excuse me," Meghan said finally, her voice soft but trembling. Kris gave a theatrical shrug. "Oh, it's just a saying, darling. Don't take it so seriously." But everyone in the room knew it wasn't a joke. The reference was unmistakable. Mean Girls. The ultimate exclusion line. A pop culture dagger delivered by the queen of pop culture herself. Kim stifled a laugh behind her napkin. Chloe muttered something under her breath. Oprah's jaw tightened. Even Jennifer Lopez, trying to stay neutral, looked uncomfortable. Harry stood up. That was unnecessary. Kris raised an eyebrow. Was it? He opened his mouth to respond, but Meghan touched his arm. Harry, she said quietly. Don't. Because she knew. In this room, defending herself wouldn't fix anything. It would only make it worse. The cameras were already rolling. The narrative was already writing itself. Kris had publicly humiliated her, and everyone had seen it. Meghan swallowed hard, forcing composure. Well, thank you for your hospitality, she said finally, her voice trembling just slightly. We'll find our way out. Kris tilted her head, pretending concern. Oh, don't go. We're just having fun. But Meghan was done. She stood up, straightened her gown, and turned away before anyone could see the tears forming in her eyes. Harry followed, his expression thunderous. The crowd parted as they walked toward the exit, whispers trailing behind them like confetti. Did that really just happen? Kris went too far. She deserved it. By the time they reached the doors, the murmurs had turned into buzz. Phones out, flashes lighting their path. Someone caught the moment Meghan brushed a tear away discreetly, her hand trembling. It was too late. The humiliation had gone viral before she even made it to the car. Inside the Jenner circle, the mood was electric. Kris lifted her glass again, unbothered. To strong women who can take a joke, she said. Laughter erupted, some nervous, some genuine. The sound echoed through the room as the doors closed behind Meghan and Harry. But beneath that laughter was something darker, a collective understanding that a line had been crossed. Later, when the videos started spreading online, the reactions split. Some praised Kris's iconic moment, calling it Hollywood's new power move. Others called it cruel, tone-deaf, bullying. But for Kris, it didn't matter. Every click, every headline, every replay was proof she still controlled the conversation. Meghan, meanwhile, sat in the back seat of the car, silent. Harry's hand rested on hers, but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, the rhythmic sound of Los Angeles traffic filling the silence. She humiliated you, Harry said finally. Meghan took a deep breath. She wanted to. What do we do now? Her voice was flat. We don't react. Not yet. She looked out the window, her reflection fractured by the passing streetlights. Let them think they've won. Harry turned to her, confused. You're not going to let it go, are you? She smiled faintly, coldly. Kris Jenner just made an enemy. She has no idea what she started. Back inside the ballroom, Kris leaned toward Kim. I hope they took it well, she said with mock sincerity. Kim laughed softly. Oh, Mom, you just broke the internet. Kris smirked. Good. That was the goal. And indeed, within hours, the internet would explode. Clips of the "You Can't Sit With Us" exchange would dominate social media. Memes, hashtags, reaction videos, it was all instant. But none of them knew yet what Meghan was planning. Because while Kris thought she had ended the game, Meghan was only just beginning to play hers. The next day, a carefully worded PR statement would appear on a celebrity news page, downplaying the event. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. Texts, recordings, alliances shifting. The humiliation at Kris Jenner's party wouldn't fade quietly. It would spark a chain of events that would pull Hollywood into a storm no one saw coming. And the next person to feel the heat wouldn't be Meghan. It would be Kris herself. Because the Duchess wasn't done. She was wounded, yes, but also calculating. And what came next would make the 6 words heard around Hollywood look like a prelude to war. The car door slammed shut with a metallic thud that echoed through the night. Meghan sat motionless, staring out the tinted window as the flashing lights of the paparazzi faded behind them. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, too controlled, the kind of restraint that only comes when you're seconds away from breaking. Harry said nothing. His fists rested on his knees, tight, white-knuckled, pulsing with the kind of anger that comes from humiliation, not just on behalf of yourself, but the person you love. He'd seen Meghan embarrassed before. He'd seen her hurt, misrepresented, attacked by tabloids and strangers. But never like this. Never in a room full of people who laughed quietly while she was being cut down in real time. Are you okay? He finally asked, his voice low but shaky. Meghan didn't answer right away. She blinked, and a tear rolled silently down her cheek. She said it like she'd rehearsed it, she whispered. Like she wanted to humiliate me. Harry's jaw tightened. Of course she did. Kris Jenner doesn't make mistakes. Everything that woman does is scripted. He leaned back in his seat, trying to breathe through the fury. You know what hurts me most? No one stopped her. Not Oprah. Not one of those so-called friends. Meghan turned to him then, her eyes glistening. That's Hollywood, Harry. They don't intervene. They pick sides. And tonight, they made it very clear which side they're on. The car glided through Beverly Hills, past the sprawling mansions and palm trees that glowed under streetlights. It was beautiful, but to them, it felt suffocating. Harry rubbed his temple, his voice bitter. I thought we were past this. The press, the royal family, the gossip. I thought this was supposed to be our new beginning. Freedom, remember? That's what we called it. Meghan's lips trembled. Freedom doesn't exist here. It's just another kind of cage. Only this one smiles at you before it closes. There was a pause. Heavy, suffocating. Then Harry let out a small laugh. Humorless, sharp. I walked away from the royal family because I thought I could protect you from people like them. Turns out they just have better teeth and worse manners. Meghan glanced at him, startled by the sudden bitterness in his tone. Harry, no, he said firmly. I need to say this. That woman humiliated you. She mocked you like you were some B-list social climber trying to sneak into her party. You didn't deserve that. Meghan exhaled slowly. I did walk into her world uninvited. That doesn't justify cruelty. She's the queen of cruelty, Meghan said softly. You don't get to the top in her business by being kind. Harry looked down, his hand trembling slightly as he clenched his fist again. If this were London, he started, then stopped. Meghan finished the sentence for him. If this were London, you'd have said something in public. He nodded. I would have. I wanted to tonight. Meghan smiled weakly. And that's exactly what she wanted. Her voice dropped lower, colder. Kris Jenner lives for public meltdowns. She turns drama into profit. If we'd reacted, she'd already have a camera crew waiting outside our car. Harry sat back, fuming in silence. He hated that she was right. He turned to her again. So what do we do? Just let her walk all over you. Meghan wiped her eyes carefully, reapplying her composure like armor. No, we let her think she did. He frowned. You're planning something, aren't you? She smiled faintly. Not yet, but I don't forget. The silence stretched again as the city lights blurred past. Harry looked out the window, his reflection pale against the glass. In his mind, the night replayed over and over. Kris's smirk, the laughter, the way Meghan's smile faltered under the weight of a room that wanted her gone. He clenched his teeth. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was betrayal. Oprah, of all people, sitting there saying nothing. The same woman who had given them the stage to tell their story to the world, now quietly complicit in their humiliation. He could forgive a lot of things, the tabloids, the lies, even the mockery. But silence. That was the hardest to forgive. As the car stopped at a red light, Harry looked out at a billboard above Sunset Boulevard, an ad for a new reality series produced by Kris Jenner. The tagline read, "Never underestimate a woman with a plan." He stared at it, his pulse quickening. You know what the worst part is? He said finally. Meghan looked up. What? She'll milk this. Every headline, every meme, every post, she'll turn it into her next season's storyline. We're just another episode to her. Meghan nodded. And we'll be the villains. Harry ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. You don't deserve to be anyone's villain. She gave a small, sad smile. That's the price of being misunderstood. The car turned into the long driveway of their Montecito home. As they pulled up to the gates, the security lights flickered on, washing the scene in soft gold. Harry got out first, slamming the door harder than he intended. He started pacing near the garden, his anger still raw. Meghan followed, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool air. Harry, she said quietly, please don't do anything rash. He stopped and turned toward her. I'm not the one people see as dangerous, Meghan. You are. Her eyes widened. What's that supposed to mean? He hesitated, then sighed. It means they'll always find a way to blame you. Every time something goes wrong, they'll twist it until you're the problem. Meghan lowered her gaze. You sound like the tabloids. Harry shook his head. No, I sound like a man who's tired of watching the woman he loves get torn apart by people who don't even know her. They stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Meghan broke it. You remember when we said we'd build our own path? That we didn't need their approval? I remember. This is the test, she said. Whether we can survive humiliation and still walk with our heads high. Harry exhaled, his anger softening into something else, protectiveness. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Meghan. I mean it. She reached out, placing a hand on his chest. I know, but sometimes protection means not fighting back immediately. Sometimes it means waiting for the right moment. He nodded slowly, though it went against every instinct he had. Inside, Meghan went straight to her study and sat at her desk. She pulled out a notepad and began writing phrases, thoughts, reminders. Harry watched from the doorway. What are you doing? Documenting, she said simply. Every detail, every word she said, every reaction. There's going to be a record of what happened tonight. Harry frowned. You're not thinking of... No, she interrupted. Not yet. But one day, if they try to twist this, I'll have the truth ready. He nodded, then leaned against the doorway, studying her. You're stronger than I am sometimes. She smiled faintly. No, I just learned how to lose gracefully until it's my turn to win. That night, Harry couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kris's smirk, heard the laughter, replayed the look on Meghan's face when she realized she wasn't welcome. He sat up, grabbed his phone, and opened Twitter. The trending topics were already brutal. Hashtag you can't sit with us. Hashtag Kris versus Meghan. Hashtag Hollywood mean girl moment. Thousands of memes. Hundreds of clips. A handful of defenders, drowned out by the noise. Harry felt a pit in his stomach. He turned the phone off and stared into the darkness. By morning, the storm had doubled. News outlets were already dissecting the exchange. Was Kris Jenner out of line? Did Meghan crash the party? Sources close to the family say it was all in good fun. Good fun. That phrase made him sick. Meghan, meanwhile, sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through the articles with the calmness of someone who had already accepted the inevitability of betrayal. You don't have to read that, Harry said. I do, she replied. I need to know how they'll spin it. He shook his head. They'll spin it like they always do. You'll be the villain. She'll be the icon. Meghan looked up at him then. Eyes cold, composed, but with fire underneath. Not forever. Harry sat beside her, defeated. You still want to go back out there? To those people? Meghan didn't hesitate. No, but I won't let them define me. Not again. Harry reached for her hand. So what happens now? Meghan's voice was steady. Now we wait. Let them celebrate their moment. They think they embarrassed me. They think they silenced us. She leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. But I've learned something from them. Every downfall can be rewritten as a comeback. And if Kris Jenner wants a war, she'll get one. Harry exhaled deeply. Then I guess we're back in the game. Meghan gave a small, knowing smile. No, Harry. We're starting a new one. As the morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, Harry finally understood. Meghan wasn't broken by what had happened. She was calculating. The humiliation would become fuel. The whispers would become headlines. And Kris Jenner, for all her strategy and PR mastery, had just underestimated the one thing she couldn't script, Meghan Markle's resolve. But what Meghan didn't realize, what neither of them did, was that Kris wasn't finished either. Because that six-word insult wasn't spontaneous. It was just the opening move. The real game, the one that would drag half of Hollywood into its orbit, was about to begin. And when the next move landed, it wouldn't just bruise Meghan's pride. It would shake her entire image. The clip was only 12 seconds long. 12 seconds that would define an entire week of headlines, memes, and outrage. It started with Kris Jenner's sparkling smile and ended with Meghan Markle's frozen face, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her champagne glass. The 6 words that detonated the moment were crystal clear, even over the clinking of cutlery and the soft background music. You can't sit with us. The video, captured by a stylist's assistant seated 2 tables away, was uploaded to TikTok before Meghan and Harry even made it home. Within 30 minutes, it had been shared to Twitter. Within an hour, Instagram. By morning, it had gone global. But let's go back to the moment itself, that instant where time seemed to slow and the air grew thick. After Kris delivered the line, the sound seemed to drain from the room. Every smile dimmed. Every hand froze. Even the band, mid-song, faltered for a second. It wasn't just an insult. It was theater, precision engineered, delivered with elegance, like a queen reminding a trespasser whose throne she sat on. Meghan's face said everything. The practiced smile faltered, the muscles around her jaw tightening. Her eyes flicked toward Harry, searching for grounding, and found his face hardening in silent fury. Some guests looked horrified. Others looked amused. But most did what Hollywood does best. They watched, pretending not to. Kris didn't flinch. She sipped her champagne, leaned back, and gave a small, satisfied smile. "Relax," she said softly, her voice sugar-coated but unmistakably sharp. "It's just a saying, darling. We're all friends here." But no one in that room believed her. Oprah's hand hovered over her glass, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Kim just smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth twitching with smug restraint. Even Jennifer Lopez, always diplomatic, looked away. The camera phone that caught it all zoomed slightly, perfectly framing Meghan's reaction. The single raised eyebrow, the controlled exhale, the faint flicker of pain, and then the mask of grace sliding back into place. Harry's voice, low and cutting, slipped into the edge of the recording. "That's enough." But Kris didn't hear it. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. That was the moment the clip ended. And yet, the real damage began when the world saw it. Hours later, the hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag KrisJenner70th. Hashtag You Can't Sit With Us. Hashtag Duchess of Drama. Hashtag Queen of Hollywood. Within hours, it wasn't just trending, it was dominating every timeline. Comment sections lit up like wildfire. "Kris said what we were all thinking," one user wrote. "This is bullying, not banter," another argued. Everyone had an opinion. No one had context. The memes came next. Split screens of Mean Girl scenes next to Meghan's expression. TikToks replaying the clip in slow motion with dramatic sound effects. YouTube compilations titled Meghan's Most Awkward Moments. For Kris Jenner, it was brand perfection. Controversy meant relevance. The cameras outside her mansion doubled overnight. Brands were already calling her team about leveraging the moment. For Meghan, it was carnage. She woke up to thousands of messages, some sympathetic, most mocking. Her name was trending on every platform. The headlines were brutal. Kris Jenner humiliates Meghan Markle in front of Hollywood's elite. Duchess meets Queen and gets dethroned. Mean Girl moment or masterclass in power. The royal biographers weighed in. The talk shows dissected it. Even British tabloids, the same ones Meghan had fled from, jumped on it gleefully. And yet, Kris stayed silent. That silence was the most calculated move of all. It allowed the public to fill the gaps, to shape the narrative, to make her look effortless. She didn't need to explain herself, because the world was already explaining her for her. Meghan's PR team scrambled. Emails flew, crisis meetings formed, phone calls to publicists who were suddenly unavailable. Within hours, her team released a short statement. Meghan and Harry were delighted to celebrate Kris Jenner's milestone birthday and wish her continued success. Any reports of tension are entirely false. But the damage was done. No one believed the statement. Not when there was video proof. Not when every micro-expression had already been analyzed in Ultra HD by millions of people. Harry, on the other hand, was livid. When he saw the clip for the first time, his reaction was visceral. He slammed the phone down on the counter so hard it cracked. "They're mocking her," he hissed. "They're all mocking her." Meghan stood nearby, arms folded, face unreadable. "That's what they do," she said quietly. "They build you up, then they tear you down. And then they laugh about it over brunch." Harry paced the living room like a caged animal. "We should sue." "For what?" she asked calmly. "For defamation. For invasion of privacy. For humiliation." Meghan shook her head. "You can't sue people for being cruel. That's Kris's superpower. She knows how to cut you in ways that don't leave legal scars." Harry ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "So we just let her win?" Meghan looked at him then, eyes steady. "Winning isn't about reacting. It's about controlling what happens next." And she meant it. Behind her calm, something was shifting, not just embarrassment, but resolve. Meghan had been here before. The British tabloids, the royal fallout, the family fractures, humiliation was familiar territory. But each time, she found a way to turn it into narrative. This wouldn't be any different. Still, the emotional toll was undeniable. Later that night, Meghan scrolled through her phone in bed. Reading the comments, she told herself not to read. Who does she think she is? Kris handled that with class. She finally met someone who could outmaneuver her. She looked like she was about to cry. Her thumb hesitated on that last one. Because it was true. She had been about to cry. Not because of the words themselves. She'd been insulted before, but because of what they represented. The moment she realized she wasn't just being mocked by a person. She was being mocked by an entire industry that had quietly decided she didn't belong. Hollywood, the same world she'd fought to be accepted by, had closed its doors. Meanwhile, Kris Jenner was at brunch the next morning, laughing with Kim, Khloe, and Kylie at the montage of memes playing on her phone. Can you believe this? Kim said between bites of avocado toast. They've already made merch. Kris chuckled. Well, if you can't laugh at yourself. But you weren't laughing at yourself, Khloe said with a grin. You were laughing at her. Kris smiled slyly. Same difference. They all laughed. But Kris's mind was already elsewhere. She knew the story wasn't over, and she wasn't about to let it fade. Kim, she said suddenly. You know that producer from Hulu? The one we spoke to about doing a behind-the-scenes special? Kim looked up. Yeah. Let's call him, Kris said, eyes gleaming. I think we just found our cold open. Back in Montecito, Harry's anger hadn't cooled. He made phone calls, to advisors, to lawyers, even to Oprah, who answered on the third ring. Harry, she said gently, don't make this worse. The world moves on quickly. By next week, they'll forget. But he knew they wouldn't. Meghan wasn't trending because people cared. She was trending because people enjoyed watching her lose. He hung up, pacing the room. I can't believe she's getting away with this. Meghan looked up from her laptop. Of course she is. She's Kris Jenner. Hollywood doesn't punish power, it rewards it. She closed her laptop with a decisive snap. But that doesn't mean we can't use it. Harry frowned. What do you mean? I mean, if they want to turn this into a spectacle, she said, then we'll give them one. But on our terms. Harry hesitated. You're not talking about another interview, are you? She smiled faintly. No. Something better. Something they can't edit. Harry exhaled. You scare me sometimes. You married me for that, she said softly. Across Los Angeles, Kris Jenner received a text message from an unknown number that evening. It read, You won tonight. But the game's not over. She stared at it for a moment, her smile slowly returning. Oh, Meghan, she whispered. You really want to play? She poured herself another glass of champagne and whispered to herself. Then let's play. The war for Hollywood's throne had officially begun. But what Kris didn't know, not yet, was that Meghan's next move would come from someone inside her own camp. Because betrayal always sells better when it's homegrown. And the next betrayal would turn Hollywood's laughter into silence. The internet doesn't wait. It moves faster than any human can react, and when it lands like a storm. By the time Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had returned to Montecito that night, the first wave had already hit. The 12-second clip of Kris Jenner's iconic 6 words, "You can't sit with us," was already circulating, and Hollywood, as always, was ruthless in its response. The moment the video hit TikTok, the algorithm picked it up like a fire starter. Within minutes, thousands of users had seen it, liked it, and shared it. The comments section was a chaotic mix of amusement, cruelty, and disbelief. Kris just shaded a duchess, one user wrote. Another commented, mean girls would be proud. And the most merciless of all, she looked like she was about to cry. Priceless. Within an hour, the clip had migrated to Twitter, with hashtags like hashtag you can't sit with us, hashtag KrisJenner70, and hashtag Hollywood humiliation trending worldwide. Each retweet added fuel to a wildfire that no one could contain. Screenshots, memes, and reaction videos followed in a relentless torrent. Someone had cleverly spliced the footage with the infamous cafeteria scene from Mean Girls, creating a juxtaposition that painted Meghan as the outsider being rejected by the cool table. Instagram was no better. Influencers uploaded reaction reels. Commentators narrated Meghan's supposed emotions, dissecting every micro-expression. Even YouTube creators jumped on the story, crafting dramatic recaps with thumbnails reading, Meghan's most humiliating moment, and Kris Jenner crushes Meghan on her own birthday. Meghan's team scrambled, working in overdrive to control the narrative. Emails flew across the Atlantic and Pacific. Publicists called in favors. PR teams drafted statements promising, Meghan and Harry were delighted to celebrate Kris Jenner's milestone birthday. Any reports of tension are entirely false. But the problem wasn't the facts. The problem was optics. And in Hollywood, optics are everything. A statement released hours after the clip went viral was already too late. The internet had already chosen its narrative, and unfortunately for Meghan, it wasn't kind. Harry watched the storm unfold from the kitchen of their Montecito home. He scrolled through his phone, a growing fury tightening his jaw with each refresh. Celebrities, commentators, and even some of their friends had joined the conversation. Many framed the incident as a public humiliation designed to assert Kris Jenner's dominance. Others, however, made it more personal, mocking Meghan directly.